Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Niccolo Machiavelli. Why is it that, in almost every era, the most profound thinkers remain on the sidelines, while superficial voices dominate stages, best-selling books, and millions of followers? Why is it that those who study for decades in silence are rarely heard, and those who master only the theatre of appearances win over crowds? This paradox is not new. As early as 16th century Florence, Machiavelli had identified the logic behind this phenomenon. For him, it was not truth that governed the world, but the perception of truth. It didn't matter whether a prince was truly virtuous, just, or wise. It mattered only that he appeared so. Politics, like public life, is made of carefully staged illusions. And it is on this stage that pseudo-intellectuals shine more brightly than true intellectuals. The true thinker is, by nature, cautious. He hesitates before asserting, acknowledges complexities, and exposes contradictions. His commitment is to nuance, not seduction. But nuance doesn't go viral. Doubt doesn't generate headlines. Reflective silence doesn't generate clicks. The pseudo-intellectual, on the other hand, instinctively understands the game of spectacle. He speaks with absolute confidence, offers quick answers to insoluble problems, and dresses himself in the aesthetics of authority. He knows that, as Machiavelli would say, men in general judge more by their eyes than by their hands. We live in an era that confirms this Machiavellian diagnosis on a global scale. It's never been easier to appear wise. A vague diploma displayed without context, a carefully constructed studio set, a speech filled with difficult words delivered eloquently. The public, hungry for certainty, doesn't question, it consumes. And the more simplistic the narrative, the more pleasing it is. Because the masses don't seek truth. They seek comfort, clarity, someone who speaks what they already want to hear. Meanwhile, the genuine intellectual becomes nearly irrelevant in the marketplace of ideas. Their work demands time, their speech demands effort, their message demands that the listener think for themselves. And in a society that rewards immediate gratification, thinking has become a luxury. Thus, it's no surprise that pseudo-intellectuals, those peddlers of illusions, accumulate wealth, influence, and power, while the true builders of knowledge remain hidden in the shadows. This video isn't about envy, but about strategy. Machiavelli taught us that power isn't given to those who are right, but to those who know how to use appearances to their advantage. Therefore, understanding how and why pseudo-intellectuals win is essential, not just to criticize them, but to understand the mechanism that elevates them, and perhaps to learn to resist it. The question we need to answer is, are we facing a temporary victory of the false wise men, or a permanent transformation, where the image will forever dominate the substance? Appearance versus substance, the Machiavellian game. Machiavelli was blunt. Politics is not governed by truth, but by the appearance of truth. This phrase, so often misinterpreted as cynicism, is actually a brutal diagnosis of human nature. He observed that men, in general, judge more by their eyes than by their hands. In other words, people don't stop to investigate whether someone is truly wise, just, or virtuous. They are content to see external signs that indicate wisdom, justice, and virtue. And in this space between essence and image, the pseudo-intellectual's advantage flourishes. The true intellectual is forged in substance. He dedicates years to study, learns to doubt his own certainties, and exercises prudence. His discourse carries nuances, reservations, and points of doubt. He recognizes that reality is rarely absolute, that every theory has limits, that every argument can be revised. But it is precisely this intellectual honesty that makes him fragile on the public stage. In a world that demands quick answers and absolute confidence, the hesitation of the truly wise man seems like weakness. The pseudo-intellectual, on the other hand, is not bogged down by complexities. He dons the mask of authority, speaks with a firm voice, and declares certainties where there are only uncertainties. He transforms doubts into slogans, fragile theories into absolute truths. His concern is not with the coherence of thought, but with the immediate impact of performance. He embodies the Machiavellian lesson, appearing to be more useful than actually being. This game of appearances manifests itself in multiple ways. Visually, clothes that evoke seriousness, settings that evoke prestige, diplomas displayed without context. In language, technical terms used as ornament, seductive metaphors, an eloquence that confuses the confidence of speech with the depth of content. And in behavior, calculated postures, controlled gestures, even dramatic pauses that create the illusion of wisdom. Meanwhile, the genuine intellectual, stuck in substance, often neglects the importance of appearance. He believes that ideas alone should suffice, but Machiavelli had already warned us. The people do not see hidden intentions, nor do they evaluate the solidity of a theory. They see only the surface. And on the surface, those who know how to stage it best win. This doesn't mean that pseudo-intellectuals are mere empty charlatans. Many of them understand, instinctively or calculatedly, that the social game rewards the ability to appear convincing. They know that, in an arena dominated by attention, appearance is crucial. And so, they exploit the human weakness for symbols. We trust those who appear wise more than those who actually are. The result is a cruel paradox. Substance, when not packaged in appearance, loses public value. Wisdom that demands reflection is ignored, while illusion that offers ready-made answers thrives. This is where Machiavellian logic takes over. If appearance rules, then true intellectuals will only have a chance to influence if they understand, albeit reluctantly, the importance of the mask. Machiavelli wasn't glorifying lies. He was describing a game that has always existed. And in this game, appearance often defeats substance. That's why, today, pseudo-intellectuals gain space, wealth, and power, while genuine thinkers remain confined to libraries, universities, and restricted circles. They are too profound for a world that judges by the surface. The appeal to authority and the seduction of the masses. Machiavelli knew that power rarely depends on possessing the truth. It depends above all on the ability to appear convincing to the masses. And the most effective tool for this, yesterday and today, is authority. Not authority achieved through substance, but rather staged authority, built around symbols, titles, and images that command respect. This is where pseudo-intellectuals find their greatest advantage. They understand that for most people, it's not necessary to present solid evidence or consistent thought. It's enough to evoke signs of authority, a diploma, even out of context, a vague but imposing title, a studio that mimics the atmosphere of a famous podcast, technical vocabulary, even if used superficially. These elements don't prove anything, but they function as psychological shortcuts. Psychologist Anna Yudin calls this an appeal to authority. We need to talk about pseudo-in. This is the fallacy in which someone presents themselves as an expert and demands credibility, not based on the content of their arguments, but on the weight of their supposed position. It's the doctor who refuses to be questioned, saying, "Trust me, I'm a doctor." It's the speaker who hides their true qualifications, but tirelessly repeats vague titles to avoid being challenged. It's the author who speaks of neuroscience, quantum physics, and psychology as if they were a master in all areas, when in reality, their training is limited. For Machiavelli, this would simply confirm an uncomfortable truth. The crowd is guided more by external signs of power than by critical analysis. People don't have the time or the inclination to thoroughly examine each argument. So when someone presents themselves with confidence and displays the appearance of authority, the tendency is to believe them. Few ask, "What exactly did he study?" Or, "What is the basis of this argument?" Most see only the cover. And if the cover is convincing, the content matters little. Pseudo-intellectuals dominate this theatre of authority. They know that, in a society saturated with information, those who speak with absolute certainty always seem more trustworthy than those who admit doubts. The seduction lies precisely in simplicity. while the true intellectual highlights nuances, recognizes limits, and invites reflection. The pseudo-intellectual offers ready-made answers packaged in catchphrases. And the masses, tired of the world's complexity, prefer to consume easy certainties rather than face difficult truths. This is the secret of collective seduction. You don't need to teach people how to think. You need to comfort them with the impression that they already know. The pseudo-intellectual assumes the role of a safe guide, someone who conveys clarity amidst chaos. Unshakable confidence replaces depth, and the appearance of erudition is enough to win loyal followers. But here lies the danger Machiavelli would likely highlight. When power is based solely on symbols of authority, it becomes fertile ground for manipulation. The people, unable to differentiate between genuine wisdom and calculated performance, place their trust in those who dominate the stage, not those who master knowledge. And the more we trust these false guides, the more we allow truth to be buried under the weight of illusion. The appeal to authority, when used as a weapon, becomes a silent contract. The masses surrender obedience in exchange for psychological security. They don't need to think. They don't need to question. They don't need to deal with uncertainty. They simply trust the current expert, the fashion guru, the intellectual who dresses like one. It's the modern version of the Machiavellian court. Whoever dominates the appearance of power controls hearts and minds, even if its substance is as shallow as a saucer. The prize for superficiality. We live in an era where depth is punished and superficiality rewarded. The paradox is clear. The deeper one delves into a topic, the more nuances one discovers, the more doubts arise, the more uncertainties need to be presented. But the marketplace of ideas, governed by algorithms and the rush of audiences, doesn't reward doubt. It rewards certainties, short slogans, and punchy phrases that fit into a 30-second video. And in this game, pseudo-intellectuals are the champions. Machiavelli would explain this clearly. Power lies not in what is true, but in what is useful. And usefulness, in today's world, is measured by engagement. It doesn't matter if the thesis is complex or even questionable. What matters is whether it circulates quickly, generates applause, and goes viral. The genuine thinker, with his dense language and lengthy analyses, becomes too burdensome for an audience trained to consume scraps of information. The pseudo-intellectual, with his sharp and precise discourse, fits perfectly into the logic of superficiality. Superficiality has another reward: popularity. Those who speak in absolutes gain immediate trust. Those who promise simple solutions to complex dilemmas win loyal followers. Those who dramatize their ideas theatrically attract attention in a sea of competing voices. Substance, on the other hand, is slow, requires patience, and invites reflection, and therefore loses ground in the public arena. A clear example is the difference between scientific language and media language. Science speaks of margins of error, probabilities, and constant revisions. It admits flaws, revises conclusions, and updates methods. But this discourse sounds weak when compared to someone who speaks with a prophetic tone. This is the truth, period. It is in this contrast that superficiality gains strength. It is simple, accessible, and palatable. And as Machiavelli would say, most people don't want to be guided by reason, but by the desire for comfort. The pseudo-intellectual knows this. He understands that he doesn't need to master the content, but only the form. His strategy is that of cognitive economy, offering easy explanations that eliminate the burden of thinking. And this convenience is highly valued because in a society overloaded with information, attention becomes a scarce resource. Thus, the entire system, from digital platforms to publishers, from lectures to media universities, rewards those who reduce complexity to slogans. But this prize comes at a collective cost. The more we celebrate superficiality, the more we devalue real thought. The public becomes accustomed to easy answers, and when they encounter a true intellectual, someone who insists on exposing the contradictions of reality, They feel frustration, impatience, even hostility. The genuine thinker becomes seen as confused, complicated, too difficult, and the pseudo-intellectual, shallow but eloquent, becomes the preferred voice. Machiavelli wouldn't be surprised. For him, governing was about manipulating perceptions. If the masses desire illusions, whoever knows how to offer them will have power. This is why pseudo-intellectuals thrive. They offer exactly what the public wants, even at the cost of the truth. They embody what the Prince Machiavellian already knew. It is safer to be feared than loved. But, in our time, it is more profitable to be simplistic than profound. The reward for superficiality isn't just money or fame. It's the ability to shape public opinion, to influence millions with easy, convincing words. It's the ultimate reward in an age that values not the effort of substance, but the seduction of form. The danger of intellectual illusion. The greatest threat pseudo-intellectuals pose is not only their own superficiality, but the shadow they cast over the entire intellectual field. When charlatans dominate the public sphere, they contaminate the perception of the masses. In the eyes of the majority, there is no longer any distinction between a true thinker and an eloquent fraud. Everyone becomes seen as part of the same suspect caste. It's the side effect of illusion. When the mask replaces the face, no one trusts anyone anymore. This is the point that concerns philosophers, psychologists, and critical thinkers of our time. The exponential growth of pseudo-intellectuals not only offers false answers, but also undermines the credibility of those who have truly dedicated their lives to knowledge. The consequence is devastating. Society begins to distrust the very idea of intellectual authority. Doctors, teachers, scientists, all are questioned not for their actual failures, but because the fakes have infiltrated the same stage. Machiavelli would understand this phenomenon as a problem of collective perception. He would say that the wise prince must guard his image as carefully as his sword, because image is what governs. When pseudo-intellectuals monopolize the appearance of wisdom, they transform the arena of ideas into a continuous farce. The people, unable to distinguish substance from the performance, place their trust in whoever performs best. And thus, intellectual illusion becomes a weapon of power. The danger is that, once established, this illusion not only deceives, but also destroys. The public, frustrated by the deceptions caused by false sages, begins to adopt a cynical view. All intellectuals are corrupt, all experts lie, no one can be trusted. This generalization paves the way for a dangerous vacuum in which anyone can present themselves as a guide, as long as they know how to enchant with their form. It is in this fertile ground that populist leaders, internet gurus, and magic solution salespeople flourish. They exploit widespread distrust to offer even more simplistic, even more seductive narratives. And the more complicated the truth becomes, the more attractive the well-told lie becomes. Intellectual illusion is not just an individual fraud. It is a collective mechanism that deforms the very fabric of society. The ultimate risk is the erosion of truth as a value. When everything becomes appearance, the distinction between what is real and what is staged loses its meaning. The audience no longer demands proof, no longer seeks foundations, no longer cares about complexity. What matters is the spectacle. And when the spectacle reigns supreme, the true intellectual is driven from the stage. He still exists, but speaks to an empty auditorium. Machiavelli might have concluded that this is the price of collective naivete. A society that fails to learn to distinguish substance from illusion is doomed to be ruled by those who know how to manipulate images. The danger is not only that pseudo-intellectuals will prosper, but that, in so doing, they will erase the signs that something exists beyond the surface. And so, the greatest trick of intellectual illusion is this: to make us stop believing in the very possibility of truth. The virtue of resisting Machiavelli was never naive. He didn't believe that power was achieved through purity or truth, but through the ability to understand the human game and outplay others. This is what he called virtue, the ability to act with courage, cunning, and adaptability in the face of the uncontrollable forces of fate. And if there's one lesson we can learn from observing the rise of pseudo-intellectuals, it's that resisting them requires more than moral outrage. It requires virtue. The mistake of true intellectuals is often to believe that substance is enough, that the weight of ideas alone would be enough to unmask the farce. But Machiavelli would remind us that the masses do not necessarily follow the wisest, but the most convincing. The people do not read complex treatises. They observe signs, symbols, images, and so, those who disregard appearances hand the battlefield over to the false wise. Resisting, then, doesn't mean becoming like them. It's not abandoning substance to embrace only superficiality. It's learning to unite both dimensions, the depth of thought and the strength of staging. It's speaking clearly without sacrificing complexity, using imagery without becoming enslaved by it, communicating confidently without giving up honest doubt. In Machiavellian terms, it's balancing the fox and the lion, the cunning that deceives and the strength that commands respect. If pseudo-intellectuals thrive because they know how to appear, true intellectuals must learn to appear without ceasing to be. They must understand that, in an age governed by perceptions, form is the necessary bridge to bring substance to the masses. Otherwise, knowledge will remain confined to silent libraries, while public opinion is shaped by shallow phrases in viral videos. Mass virtue, it also requires something deeper, the courage to resist the seduction of one's own audience. Because the temptation to please is great, it's easy to give in to applause, oversimplify, and abandon the truth in the name of popularity. The real challenge lies in capturing attention without betraying the content. This is the nearly impossible but indispensable balance if we want wisdom to have a voice amidst the spectacle. Fate, or, as Machiavelli called it, destiny, fortune, will always favor those who know how to adapt. Pseudo-intellectuals have already understood this. It is up to true thinkers to decide whether they will remain trapped in the sterile purity of substance, or whether they will dare to learn the art of appearance to advance the truth. It is not enough to denounce the false, it is necessary to compete with it for space. A virtue of resistance, therefore, is not about taking refuge in the ivory tower, nor about relegating oneself to the empty theatre. It is about walking between both worlds, having the substance that sustains and the appearance that convinces. Only in this way can true intellectuals regain influence in a society increasingly dominated by shadows. And perhaps that is Machiavelli's final lesson. In a world where illusion rules, resisting doesn't mean rejecting the game. It means learning to play it without losing one's soul.